The night sky above the barren landscape was pitch black, except for the dim glow of distant stars. The air was cold, sharp, and the silence felt thick enough to cut through. On the ground, a small group of soldiers was gathered near a makeshift campfire, preparing for the mission ahead. But the eyes of one individual were locked on a different target. Seraphina stood apart from the others, her figure a silhouette against the fire's flickering light. She was tall, unnaturally tall for a human woman, and her movements were precise, controlled, like a predator observing its prey. Everything about her was sharp. Her features, her focus, and the way she held herself. Every inch of her body had been sculpted, trained, and perfected for a single purpose. She was bred to kill. Her creators had spent years crafting her, using the latest genetic modifications to make her the ultimate weapon. Her senses were heightened to the point where she could hear a heartbeat from a mile away, see in near complete darkness, and react faster than the human eye could follow. She was an assassin, and in the world of war, there was no one more effective than her. But it didn't mean she was happy. In the deep recesses of her mind, she often asked herself what it all meant, her purpose, her existence. She had been told she was created to protect humanity, to ensure its survival against the alien forces that threatened to destroy it. But who was she really protecting, and what was she protecting herself from? The truth was, she had never known life before war. She had been trained to kill from the moment she could walk, her entire existence shaped around it. There was no family, no past, no love. There were only orders and targets. Her mission tonight was no different. The Ethar were a ruthless alien species. They had invaded several human colonies and were planning to strike again. Seraphina's task was simple: infiltrate their stronghold, find their leader, and eliminate him. A clean job. It was what she was built for. No questions, no hesitation. She adjusted the straps of her combat gear, her fingers moving with mechanical precision. The others in her unit didn't dare approach her. They knew better. Seraphina was a tool, a weapon, and they treated her as such. She was to do her job and stay out of their way. The only person who dared to approach her was Eli. He was the medic on this mission. Unlike Seraphina, he had no military training. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to heal. His job was to keep everyone alive in case something went wrong. But he had been trained in the old ways of medicine, not the harsh methods of the battlefield. He wasn't accustomed to the violence that often surrounded him, but here he was, in the middle of it, trying to do what he could. Eli was the polar opposite of Seraphina. Where she was a weapon, he was a healer. Where she was cold, calculated and detached, Eli was warm, compassionate, and understanding. He had been assigned to this mission because of his unique skill set. He had saved countless lives in the past, but he never felt like a true soldier. He didn't belong in a war. He wanted to save people, not kill them. But in this world, it was kill or be killed. And so here he was, serving alongside Seraphina. As Eli approached her, his footsteps were soft, almost tentative. Seraphina didn't look at him. Her gaze remained fixed on the distant horizon, as though she could see the future unfolding before her. "You ready?" Eli asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Seraphina didn't answer at first. She rarely did. Her focus was always on the task at hand, and talking wasn't part of the mission. But Eli wasn't like the others. He didn't shy away from her silence. "Just checking," he continued, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "You're the best at what you do. But, if you need anything, I'm here." Seraphina's eyes shifted to him for a brief moment, her gaze sharp and unreadable. She could sense the uncertainty in his voice, the soft tremor of fear that he couldn't fully hide. She wasn't sure if it was directed at her or at the situation they were about to face. But either way, it didn't matter. Fear was a luxury she didn't have. "I don't need anything," she replied flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. "Just keep your focus on your job."
"I'll handle mine." Eli nodded, but there was something in his eyes that she couldn't ignore.
He didn't look at her like the others did. He didn't see her as just a weapon. He saw her as a person. And that was something she wasn't sure how to process. The night stretched on and the camp grew quiet. One by one, the soldiers began to settle in for rest, their eyes heavy with the weight of what was to come. But Serafina couldn't sleep. She never did before a mission. The anticipation, the adrenaline, the sharp edge of what she was about to do always kept her awake. She had killed before, many times. And each time it was the same. The rush, the finality, the blood. But no matter how many times she did it, it never felt right. She had long since stopped asking herself why. It didn't matter. There were no answers. Only the mission. As dawn began to break, the team gathered their gear and prepared to move out. Eli checked his medical supplies, ensuring everything was in order. He knew what lay ahead. There would be injuries. There always were. And while Serafina was designed to fight, Eli was there to pick up the pieces. The journey to the Ythar stronghold was a quiet one, the landscape barren and desolate, a reflection of the war that had raged for years. The mission was simple: infiltrate, eliminate, and get out. But there was always something more beneath the surface. The Ythar were clever. They had their own methods of fighting, and Serafina knew they wouldn't go down without a fight. As they neared their destination, the tension in the air was palpable. The team moved swiftly, every step calculated, every moment precious. The stronghold loomed ahead, its silhouette dark and menacing against the morning sky. It was time to do what Serafina was born to do. But something felt different this time. As Serafina adjusted her gear and prepared for the final phase of the mission, Eli's words echoed in her mind. "I'm here if you need anything." It was a simple statement, yet it stirred something deep inside her. Was it compassion? Was it care? No, she couldn't afford to think like that. She was a weapon. And Eli was just a medic. But the truth was, in that moment, she wasn't so sure about what she had become. As the team continued their approach to the Ythar stronghold, the terrain grew more difficult. The ground beneath their feet shifted from dirt and gravel to cracked, jagged rocks, and the air began to feel heavier, like the weight of the war itself pressing down on them. The faint hum of distant engines from the Thar base echoed across the desolate landscape, a constant reminder of the danger that awaited them. Serafina led the group, moving swiftly and silently, her every step calculated. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon, constantly alert for any sign of enemy movement. She had done this 1,000 times before, each mission blending into the next, but this time something felt different. There was an unfamiliar feeling stirring within her, like a quiet whisper in the back of her mind, urging her to slow down, to think. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to. The mission had to come first. Behind her, Eli kept his eyes focused on the ground ahead of him. The medic wasn't used to this kind of terrain. His boots stumbled over loose rocks, and the constant crunch of gravel underfoot felt out of place in the stillness of the desert. But he pushed forward, determined not to let his discomfort show. Eli had always been good at reading people, but he couldn't read Serafina. Her movements were fluid, controlled, and cold, like a machine operating at peak efficiency. Every now and then, when he looked at her from behind, he could see her stiff posture, her unwavering focus, but something about her still seemed distant. He couldn't tell what it was, but it was as though she wasn't entirely present with them, even though her physical form was right there. She was a weapon, but Eli had learned that even weapons could be more than what they appeared to be. And it troubled him that he couldn't figure out what she needed. He had seen soldiers like her before, cold, detached, driven by the singular goal of completing their mission. But in Serafina, there was something else, a deeper emptiness that made her stand out from the others. She was always so composed, never allowing emotions to break through her steel facade. But Eli had begun to wonder, was she really as invincible as she appeared? Or was there something else buried deep inside her? It wasn't long before they reached the outskirts of the Ethar stronghold. The team paused behind a craggy ridge, their eyes fixed on the heavily guarded facility. Towering walls of metal and stone stretched high into the sky, and the Ethar soldiers patrolled the area, their movements synchronized in eerie precision. Every once in a while, a distant hum of an engine could be heard as patrol ships flew overhead, adding an extra layer of danger to their mission. Serafina knelt down behind a boulder, her sharp gaze scanning the enemy forces. Her hand brushed over her weapons, the cool metal of her guns familiar and comforting. She felt the adrenaline starting to build within her. This was what she was made for. She was a soldier, and nothing else mattered. But even as her mind focused on the task at hand, a faint thought lingered at the edges of her consciousness. Eli's voice. "I'm here if you need anything." She quickly dismissed it. It was a simple statement. He was just a medic, after all. His job was to patch up anyone who got hurt. It wasn't his role to question what she did or who she was. He was just here to keep everyone alive, not to get involved in the mission.
Serafina. Eli's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. He had crouched beside her, his face tense but determined.
We need a plan. I don't know how long we can stay out here before they notice us.
Serafina glanced at him, her eyes cold and calculating. He was right. They had to move quickly. The longer they stayed in one place, the more likely it was they would be detected. "We'll move in under the cover of darkness," she replied, her voice flat. "I'll take care of the guards. You stay back and keep the team covered." Eli nodded, but his face showed signs of uncertainty.
I can't just stand back and watch, Serafina. I need to be out there with you.
"We're a team." Serafina's eyes flickered to him, her expression unreadable. She had always worked alone. That was the way it had been drilled into her. But Eli was persistent, his gaze not leaving hers, and for the briefest moment she saw something in his eyes that made her pause. It wasn't fear or doubt, it was something else.
You're a medic, she said slowly.
Your job is to keep people alive. Stay out of the way unless it's absolutely necessary. Eli didn't argue. He understood the rules. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to help the others survive. But as he looked at Serafina, he felt an overwhelming urge to protect her. She was so different from the other soldiers. She wasn't just a machine built for combat. He could see it now. There was something buried deep within her, something he couldn't quite grasp. But it was there. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the group moved in. Serafina led the way, her movements swift and silent as she navigated the rocky terrain, using every shadow as cover. The other soldiers followed closely behind, their weapons drawn and ready. Eli stayed at the rear, his medical kit strapped tightly to his side, constantly checking on the team to ensure no one was injured. The closer they got to the stronghold, the more tense the atmosphere became. Every step was calculated, every breath held in anticipation of the moment when they would break through the Uthar defenses. Serafina felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was where she excelled. This was where she belonged. But there was a part of her, a part she rarely acknowledged, that felt something more. She wasn't just here to kill. She was here because she had a mission. And that mission, whatever it was, seemed to involve more than just ending lives. For the first time in her existence, she felt a flicker of doubt, an unsettling thought that perhaps she was more than just the weapon everyone had made her to be. The group moved in closer to the outer walls of the stronghold, and Serafina signaled for them to stop. She crouched low, scanning the area for any signs of movement. There were 2 guards posted at the entrance, their attention focused on the area ahead of them. In an instant, Serafina was on her feet, moving like a shadow across the ground. She reached the first guard, her movement swift and silent, and in a single motion, her knife was at his throat. He never saw it coming. The second guard barely had time to react before he, too, was incapacitated. Eli watched from his position behind cover, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen Serafina in action before, but each time it never failed to amaze him how effortlessly she eliminated threats. There was no hesitation, no fear, only cold, calculated precision. She was a weapon. Nothing more, nothing less. The group advanced, slipping past the unconscious guards and making their way deeper into the stronghold. The air was thick with the smell of metal and the faint hum of machinery. They were getting closer to their objective. But as they moved through the darkened hallways of the Ythar stronghold, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was no sound, no movement. It was as though the place was completely abandoned.
"Where is everyone?"
he whispered to Serafina, his voice tense. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the shadows, her senses alert for any signs of danger. But even she could feel it, the strange emptiness that hung in the air. "Stay close," she said quietly. "Something's not right."
They continued deeper into the heart of the stronghold, their steps echoing softly in the silence.
And in the back of Serafina's mind, the whisper grew louder, urging her to question everything.
"This wasn't just a mission."
There was something more, something she hadn't yet figured out. The deeper they ventured into the Ythar stronghold, the more unsettling it became. The halls, once filled with the hum of alien machinery, were eerily silent. Serafina moved ahead, her eyes flicking to every shadow, every corner, as though expecting an attack at any moment. The team followed closely behind, but there was a growing sense of unease in the air. The place had been abandoned, or so it seemed. No soldiers patrolled the hallways, no guards watched the corridors. There were no sounds of distant chatter or movement, only the cold, oppressive silence that hung in the air. Like a thick fog, even the faint whir of machinery had stopped, leaving only the sound of their footsteps and their breath. Serafina's instincts told her something was wrong. She had been in enough combat zones to know when things didn't add up, and this was one of those moments. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: infiltrate, eliminate the leader, and get out. But as they ventured further, it felt like the rules of the game were changing. The Ythar didn't just abandon their strongholds, something else was at play. Eli kept pace with the group, his mind racing. He had always been the one to patch up the wounded, to treat the injured. But this situation was different. The strange quiet unnerved him, and the weight of it pressed on his chest like a physical burden. He had seen war. He had seen the destruction it brought. But this was something else entirely. It was as if they were walking into a trap, and they didn't even know it yet. "Serafina," Eli said, his voice low but urgent.
"This doesn't feel right. I've been in combat zones before, and this is too quiet."
She didn't answer at first. Her attention remained fixed on the path ahead, her sharp eyes scanning every corner, every crevice. She had learned long ago not to trust her feelings in war. Instincts could get you killed. But there was something in Eli's voice that made her pause. He wasn't a soldier, but he had an uncanny ability to sense danger. She had seen it in the way he kept the team alive, how his quick thinking had saved them more than once. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Stay alert. Keep your guard up." They moved deeper into the stronghold, passing through long, narrow hallways lit by dim, flickering lights. The walls were lined with strange alien symbols, and the air smelled of metal and dust. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though he couldn't figure out from where. It was like an invisible presence was following them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Serafina's footsteps slowed as they approached a large door at the end of the corridor. The door was heavy, made of dark metal with intricate markings etched into its surface. She placed a hand on the door, her fingers brushing over the cool surface. "Ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "On my mark." Eli stood behind her, his heart pounding. He had never been this close to a combat zone. The Ithar were dangerous, and he knew the stakes were high. But he also knew that his role was not to fight. It was to keep everyone alive. He had seen the destruction war could cause, and he couldn't help but wonder if they were walking into something they didn't fully understand.
Serafina didn't wait for a response.
In one swift motion, she pushed the door open, stepping into the dark room beyond. The teen followed, weapons raised, scanning the area for any signs of movement. The room was large, filled with shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. Then, in the center of the room, a figure appeared. It was a Ythar, standing alone in the middle of the room. Its large, insect-like body was covered in dark armor, and its glowing yellow eyes fixated on them as they entered. The alien was not armed, but its presence alone was enough to send a chill down Eli's spine. "Stay back," Serafina ordered, her voice calm but commanding. "We need to assess the situation." But the Ithar didn't move. It stood there, almost as if it were waiting for them. Eli could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every instinct in his body screamed that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was.
"Who are you?" Serafina demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing here?"
The Ithar didn't respond immediately. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, studying her. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before the alien finally spoke. "We have been expecting you." The words sent a shockwave through the room. Serafina's hand instinctively went to her weapon, her fingers tightening around the grip. Eli's heart raced, and he could feel the blood rushing to his ears. They had been expecting them? How was that possible? The Ythar's voice was deep, almost mechanical, and it resonated in the silence of the room. "You are the one they call Serafina, the weapon."
You were bred to kill, but you are not what you think you are.
Serafina's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?"
The Ythar took a slow step forward, its movements deliberate.
You were created by humans, yes, but you were also made to forget.
To erase the past.
Eli's mind raced.
What was it saying? What past was it referring to? The Ythar continued, its voice growing colder. "You were not just created to fight. You were made to carry out a mission far greater than your understanding. A mission that the humans have kept from you." Serafina's hand tightened on her weapon. The Ythar's words struck a nerve, but she didn't let it show. She had been trained to remain in control no matter the situation. But inside, a seed of doubt began to sprout.
"What mission?"
She asked, her voice steady, though the question felt foreign coming from her.
She had always followed orders, never questioning them.
But now something inside her was pushing against the idea of blind obedience. The Athar's eyes glowed brighter as it spoke.
The truth. You were never just an assassin.
You were created to bring about the end of your own people. You were meant to lead them into destruction.
The words hit Serafina like a punch to the gut. Her entire life, everything she had known, was built on the premise of serving humanity.
She had been bred for this purpose, to fight for them, to protect them. But now, the Ythar was telling her that she had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. Eli took a step forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his medical kit. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he could see the shift in Serafina's eyes. The calm, calculated woman who had never once shown a hint of doubt was now visibly shaken. "Serafina," Eli said quietly, trying to offer some comfort. "We need to focus on the mission."
We need to get out of here. But Serafina didn't respond.
Her eyes were locked on the Athar, her expression unreadable. She had always known she was different, but this was something else entirely. If what the Ethar was saying was true, then everything she had fought for, everything she had believed in, was a lie. For the first time in her life, Seraphina didn't know who she was anymore. And that scared her more than anything. Seraphina stood frozen in the dim light, her mind racing as the Uthar's words echoed in her head. She was a weapon, created to destroy, but she had always believed she fought for something greater, for humanity, for a cause. Now, it seemed everything she knew had been twisted, warped by those who had created her. But she had been bred to kill. But she had never asked why.
She had never questioned her purpose, her mission. It had always been so clear: eliminate the threat.
But now, the truth was being forced into her mind, a truth that shattered everything. The Ithar's voice broke through her thoughts. You were meant to destroy your own people. You were created to lead them into destruction. They built you to fight, but they never told you the real reason why. Seraphina's hand tightened around the grip of her weapon, but her fingers felt numb. The weapon was an extension of herself, and yet, right now, it felt foreign, as if it didn't belong to her at all. Was this what she was? A tool? A weapon with no purpose beyond destruction? Behind her, Eli moved cautiously, his eyes darting from Seraphina to the Ethar. He could see the tension in the air, thick and heavy. The Ethar's words had shaken her, and it wasn't just her demeanor that had changed. Seraphina was different. The calm, collected woman he had worked with was now a stranger. There was a crack in the walls she had built around herself, and he wasn't sure what was behind it.
Eli.
Seraphina's voice cut through the silence. Her tone was soft, yet there was a trace of uncertainty in it, a sound he had never heard before. It was barely there, but it was enough to make him pause. What if everything I've done, everything I've believed in, is wrong?
Eli didn't know how to answer her. The truth was, he had no idea what was happening either.
All he knew was that they had come here for a mission, and now the lines were blurred, twisted into something neither of them could fully comprehend. You were created for a purpose, Seraphina, Eli said gently, his voice carrying the weight of the concern he felt. But you are not just a tool. You're not just a weapon.
You're more than that, and I know you have to believe that.
She didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, her eyes still fixed on the Ethar, who was watching her with a strange intensity. Its yellow eyes gleamed in the shadows, like two glowing embers in the dark. We've been expecting you, the Ethar repeated, its voice steady and emotionless. We've been watching you, Seraphina. You are not the first of your kind. There were others before you, and they too were led to believe in a false mission, a false cause, just like you. Seraphina's mind raced, the weight of the Ithar's words sinking in. She had never asked who she was before she became a soldier, before she became a weapon. She had been raised for one thing, and one thing only. But now a new question lingered in her mind. What if there was more to her than just the mission? What if there was something in her, something that could change the course of everything? Her grip on her weapon loosened slightly. She felt as though the ground beneath her feet was shifting, the solid foundation of her purpose crumbling away. Was everything she had done a lie? Was there a chance to rewrite her story, to choose her own path? You were bred by humans, the Ethar continued, its voice growing colder. But you were also born from their lies. They told you that you were created to protect. But what if the truth is that you were created to destroy everything they built, to bring about their downfall? The words hit Seraphina like a blow to the chest. She had always believed she was protecting humanity, that her mission was justified. But now, the Nether was telling her that she had been created for the very opposite reason. "Stop it," Seraphina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me."
You don't know what I've done. We know, the Ythar replied, its tone eerily calm.
"We know what you've done. We know what you've been told. But the truth is, you've been played. You were never meant to be their savior. You were meant to be their downfall. And now you will fulfill your purpose."
Wars.
You were always part of the plan. The room seemed to close in around Seraphina. She had always known she was different, but she had never questioned it. She had never allowed herself to think that there was more to her than what she had been trained to do. She had never stopped to wonder if there was a choice, if there was a future beyond the war, beyond the bloodshed.
Now, the idea that everything she had ever known might be a lie felt suffocating.
Her mind raced, the weight of the truth threatening to crush her. The Withar had been right about one thing. She didn't know the truth. She had only known the mission. And now, everything she had built her identity on was unraveling. Eli stepped forward, his eyes locked on Seraphina. He could see the inner turmoil that was tearing her apart. He wanted to say something to make it better, to make her believe that it wasn't too late to change, that she could still choose who she wanted to be. But the words wouldn't come. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder.
Seraphina, you don't have to do this. You don't have to be what they made you.
You have the power to choose. For a moment, Seraphina didn't respond. She just stood there, her chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. Her hand, which had been holding the weapon so tightly, now hung at her side. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who she was anymore. But Eli's words, simple as they were, had struck something deep within her. There was a flicker of hope in them, a spark that had been buried under years of conditioning, under the mission, under the bloodshed. She looked at him, her gaze softening for the first time in what felt like forever. "I don't know who I am, Eli," she admitted, her voice shaking.
I've never known anything else. But maybe
Maybe it's time to find out. Eli's eyes softened with understanding. You're not alone, Seraphina.
You have us. You have me.
The Yathar's cold voice interrupted them. You are wasting your time.
You cannot escape your purpose. You were made for destruction, and that is what you will do. But Seraphina didn't turn to face the Ythar. She didn't even acknowledge its words. Instead, she turned to Eli, her expression resolute. "I was bred to kill," she said, her voice steady now.
But I don't have to be what they made me. I will choose my own fate.
The Yathar's eyes flared with anger, its voice rising. "You cannot change your destiny. It is written in your blood."
Seraphina stepped forward, her eyes burning with determination.
"We'll see about that." With that, she turned away from the Yathar, her mind made up. She was no longer a weapon. She was Seraphina, and for the first time in her life, she was going to choose who she wanted to be. As the team moved forward, Eli walked beside her, his presence a steady anchor. For the first time in her life, Seraphina felt a sense of freedom, a sense of control. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let anyone else decide it for her.